get into the questions themselves. Okay.
Can we check if everybody's done with their material?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you can, under your participant bar, you have the ability to have like a reaction, like a raise a hand or whatnot. If you could raise your hand or put a checkbox or something positive, any kind of reaction, actually do it. If you've actually finished all of your Cloud Practitioner modules, like you finished your digital training. And again, no shame here, just tracking progress, right?
Sure. Thanks, Michael. Call me out in public with everybody on the call. Appreciate that.
Well, if everyone had responded to my email.
No. It's all good. Yeah, we just want to know. Yeah. That's all. That's all it is.
It's good. Yeah. Absolutely good question.
Yeah. Okay, good. So it seems
clearly
like
I have not.
So it seems like, just to check, it seems like the vast majority, it looked like there were only 5 people who raised and said they were done. So it looks like the majority have not done it, and just making sure. Okay, good. I'm looking at the participant list. That's what I got. So it looked like Victoria, it looked like 4 people raised their hands. Okay. Excellent. Good to know. All right. Now we get to go to the fun part. It's basically a trivia game, just with no drinking or whatever else, right? So let's do the trivia game. First of all, can everyone see that what's on my screen right now?
Yes.
Good. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to do exactly what we started to do. Actually, we did it on Wednesday, but we didn't do it Monday because I was indisposed due to storms and trees. But we're going to run through the exam basically, and we're going to run through our own practice exams. This is one of the review mode tests. I believe this is section 1. And what we're going to do, we're going to start running through the questions, and I'm going to talk about what I'm thinking about at the time that we do this. And then what will happen is we'll get a little bit faster, but I'm also going to point out strategies about how you approach these questions. Because just to say this, there's the right answer, there's the wrong answer, and then there's the Amazon answer. It's always the case with every test. I've been saying that since the Microsoft tests in 2000, right? So there's 3 possible answers. So we want the Amazon answer because, right? Yeah. So just bear with me for those of you who are sticklers for the details. It's not necessarily going to be the world perfect answer. Just deal with that. Okay. So for example, this is in the billing category. You need to launch a new EC2 instance for a beta program, which is scheduled to change its instance family, operating system, and tenancy exactly 3 months after its trial period, which basically means they're going to be changing everything about the virtual machine in 3 months. Which type of reserved instance should you use? That's a very specific question. So there's a few key things to note. First, in your mind, you want to know what service are they talking about. In this case, it's easy. They're talking about EC2. They actually call it out. The second thing is what you want to look for is what is it about the service? Do they want scalability? Do they want cost effectiveness? They'll say it. They'll say, what's the most cost effective thing that we can do with EC2? So notice in terms of like qualifiers here, what they're telling us basically is that they're talking about basically cost, licensing. That because they're asking about reserved instances. And just to say this is that they're asking about reserved instances, which is one of the licensing types that you can use with EC2. So the minute you hear reserved instances, they're asking about costs, which is why this is in the billing and pricing category. Now, the other thing they're asking about is they're not only asking about licensing, but they're asking about flexible licensing because they're asking to change the operating system, the instance type and family, which is the size of the instance, and they're asking to change tenancy, by the way, which is not normal. Most people don't change tenancy. So like this is a lot of change, right? So what they're asking, so first of all, this predicates that you know the 2 or 3 types, depending on how you categorize them, of reserved instances that are available for virtual machines. So without even looking at this, I can tell you what the answer is because I know the 3 types. And so like I know which one to choose. But here's what we're going to do. First of all, if you look at answer 1, 2, and 3, and 4, you look at the first answer, you have to ask yourself, which of these, by the way, are not real? So just to ask this, which of these is not a real reservation type? Does anyone know? Which of these is made up? You know it's garbage. You can put 1, 2, 3, or 4 if you want. So just so you know, there's no zonal RI. That doesn't exist. That's made up. There are 3 types of reservations inside of AWS. They're scheduled, There's standard and there's convertible. Now, pretend that you don't know anything about that. I just used the words scheduled, standard, and convertible, okay? Pretend you don't know anything about RIs for a second. They're asking for a flexible licensing type. Which of those three words do you think fits flexible? Scheduled, standard, or convertible? So give me 1, 2, 3, or 4. Yeah. Yeah, convertible. So even if you don't know the actual definitions, you could probably make a reasonable guess that because of a brief analysis of the question, they're looking for a keyword that probably matches that. Now, that would only work if you knew that convertible was actually a type, right? If you didn't know that zonal wasn't a type, that would probably like catch you up, right? But bottom line is there are only 3 types of reservations. You can either buy a scheduled reservation, buy a standard reservation, or one that allows you to change the operating system, the tenancy, and the actual type, which is the convertible RI, right? So in this case, we just choose convertible RI, right? And we check it out. Green, good. Now, everything I just said, all in the text, right? So this is ideally, this is kind of like the level you get to, because this is what's going to happen in conversations too. They're going to come to you and say exactly this, right? They're going to say, hey, I need you to launch an EC2 instance. How long do you need it for? I need it for 6 months. Okay, you're not going to use the reservation. Or they're going to come to you and say, hey, we're going to launch a project that's going to last a minimum of 3 years. Instantly, when you hear that, you're going to think reserved instances, because that's a 1 or 3 year commitment. So just know it actually does have practical application. It's not just AWS, like doing AWS stuff. Okay. Now, the other 2, standard RIs and scheduled RIs, by the way, are not able to really, like, they're not flexible, so they can't function. I love how they said zonal standard RI, which is not what they put up there, by the way. It just said zonal RI. Refers to a reserve instance where you reserve for a specific, like, physical location. So that wasn't even actually a thing. So again, if you're going through this yourself, the next thing you would do is probably look at reserved instances, like to get a guide for actually what these things actually stand for. It's actually, in this case, a full PDF, so which is downloading really slowly. So know that you could go through and actually refresh this if this is something that you actually didn't know. No, not that. Let's go back to this. Okay, so let's do the next one. We're going to kind of knock the rust off. We're doing another billing and pricing one. Which of the following below are the benefits of using consolidated billing in AWS? So, first of all, let's stop. What service are they talking about? Well, oddly enough, something called consolidated billing, which I'm not really sure is even a service, but more of a feature. But it's called consolidated billing. So let's assume for a moment that you don't really know anything about it. You know, it has something to do with billing and about consolidating, because they actually call it something intuitive. And then you can look and say, okay, let's see. The first answer is you get to one bill for multiple accounts. But you have to note, by the way, there's little weird checkboxes next to these, because you've got to choose 2 this time. This is multiple right answer. It's not single right answer anymore. So when we look at the first one, it says you get one bill for multiple accounts. So even if you didn't know what consolidated billing was, that actually sounds like what consolidation looks like, is consolidating many things into one. That sounds like that could be a reasonable answer. So we'll check that one just to kind of cement our guess. Consolidate together the billing and payment of both AWS accounts and Amazon Internet Service accounts. I gotta tell you, I know that I don't know everything in the industry. I've never ever heard of Amazon offering internet services. Anybody else? Seems like the one thing they don't offer, actually. No. Just to say that.
Just give it time.
very, very, very true. Yeah, just give it time. I'm sure that will happen. So as far as I know, there is no internet service. So we're gonna mark that question off as fake for a second. Allow one member account to pay the charges of all the master accounts. That doesn't sound right. Why, that doesn't even sound like how we would do it. There's usually one primary account and all the member accounts get paid for. That doesn't sound like the right thing, but maybe that's the right answer. So we'll hold that one in reserve. Share the volume pricing and reserved instance discounts by combining the usage across all accounts in the organization. I gotta tell you, when I think about the adjective consolidated, that sounds remarkably like consolidating. So that actually sounds pretty appealing right now. And then the last one says consolidate all the bills from multiple AWS accounts for only $1 every month. Are we consolidating all the accounts? Yeah, go ahead.
That would be nice since I paid all the bills, but they're not $1 a month.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice if we get like you just, hey, you get a discount, you pay $1 now if you put everything together. Yeah, so that doesn't sound right. So even if you don't know that consolidated billing allows you to consolidate your bill into one account, and that it does actually allow you to combine all of your usage, your volume usage, it consolidates it down to one account, then, you know, even then you could probably like make a reasonable guess that it's probably going to be these two. Just because the verbiage here, this is fake on the second one. The third one just doesn't sound right because that's not usually how we do things. And then of course the last one is we all wish is true, but it's just not. So if we check it, makes sense, right? That's what consolidated billing does. It consolidates everything down into one account. This explains why, of course, and then talks about like why the other answers are wrong. And of course, if you need to see more details about consolidated billing, it's there in the question. Any questions about anything that any of the methodology or mindset that I was following just now? Okay. If it occurs to you, just pop it out. You don't have to hold back. Okay, so now we've switched to the categories. The company, and by the way, you're not going to see that in the exam. You're not going to see a categorization in the upper left-hand side, just so you know. That would be super nice because it would make it a lot easier, but you're not going to see that. It's just for us. So a company has web servers running Amazon EC2 instances that access a RESTful API hosted on their data center, not in AWS. What kind of architecture is the company using? That's a good question. All right, so let's consider this. First of all, what's the service? Type it, say it, exclaim it. Like, what are we using here? We're using S3? What are we using?
EC2.
Yeah. So what does EC2 provide? Virtual machines, right? Okay, so automatically, since we know that we're talking about virtual machines that are accessing a RESTful API that is actually on their data center, first of all, we know right off the bat that we're not using serverless. So answer one is out because serverless means hidden servers, and we can see the servers because it's not serverless, right? Now, the other thing is this software as a service? Because the company's running web servers in EC2, and they in turn are using a back end that's located on premise. But it sounds like the whole product is both what's on AWS and it's what's on premise, right? So I'm pretty sure that's not SaaS, because quite frankly, SaaS is when one company takes everything and you just consume it, right? And it's not going to be PaaS, because PaaS would be like we run a database off on somebody else and we have access to control the database. We don't have access to the infrastructure, but we're consuming that platform. We're eating off that platform. So where SaaS is like us using Gmail, PaaS would be us like running a database. Like let's say MongoDB has an Atlas service. You could actually just consume Mongo, but it's running on somebody else's infrastructure, but you get access to the Mongo platform. That's platform as a service. So it sounds like neither one of these is really as a service model, because we're straddling two providers, basically our on-premise data center and AWS. Now, if you know the cloud deployment models, you know there's all into cloud, there's private cloud, which is all into on-premise, and then of course there's the hybrid model, which means you're straddling two different types of cloud, namely private and public. And so in this case, it sounds like the hybrid architecture.
Yep.
So let's check it out. Yep. And then, of course, that would be the right answer. And it even goes and talks about cloud versus hybrid versus on-premise. Explains the answer. Same reasoning I gave for like why the other ones probably don't work, right? Well, and the other thing is they clarify is that you know, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS are all actually cloud computing models. So if they were all into cloud, this would be a different thing, but it usually doesn't include private cloud, which is what on-premise is considered, right? So even better explanation there. Okay, so I'm going to start analyzing a little less, and have you step up to analyze for me, okay? So when I get your muscles going.
Michael, my apologies. I do have to drop for 4:30 and need just a quick break, but thank you. Great session so far.
All right, great. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for being here. Okay, so here we are. Users from different parts of the globe, so this is a global thing, are complaining about the slow performance of a new photo sharing website. That's especially when loading their high resolution images. Which AWS services, and you got to select two based on this, should you use to serve the files with the absolute lowest possible latency for the end users? So it's a big question. One of the services is very clearly designed for this, and the other service, well, that's going to be interesting because it's like, what's the best service, not just for latency, but for hosting photo sharing, like a photo sharing website. And this is where you get a little bit into the Amazon way of doing things. So let me ask you this first. Which service is specifically used out of these 5 to actually be able to host like photos and videos closer to the user all over the world so that the user has a better user experience? Does anyone know the answer to that? Yeah, so Luke, so good. Sorry, Bruce, you were going to say something?
No, I said I do not.
Yeah, so Luke posted it in chat. He said CloudFront. Yeah, and that's correct. CloudFront is a content distribution network. Amazon's not the only one who has a service like this. There's, Akamai and Cloudflare and Fastly and all these others who do it. Akamai's been around for like, I don't know, 20-something years, I think. And basically what they do is if you have a website with content on it, they push a copy of it out to these edge servers that are closer to the user all over the world. And so when the user goes to retrieve content from your website, instead of traveling all the way back to your physical home base and whatever location you're hosting your web server, they just travel to the cached copies and they get the cache and they go out. Now you get to control how fresh the cache is in that case. So it's not a big deal. But CloudFront is definitely one of the right answers here, because it will actually make things faster for users by putting a cached copy on these servers that are all over the world. So this question was literally designed with CloudFront as being the primary answer. Now, here's the other analysis problem. When you want to host static assets, not dynamic assets, but static web assets, which is pictures, videos, client-side JavaScript files, stuff like that. When you want to host that on Amazon, Amazon makes a very specific recommendation about which service you should use to offload that static content off of your web servers. And so when it comes to photo sharing, which is a static asset, it doesn't change a whole lot. They might upload a new version, but no one's going to be like constantly in there modifying it and changing it, right? The recommendation, Amazon has a very clear recommendation about which service you would use to host videos and pictures. Which of these services do you think would fit that? And to give you a hint, it's also the one that shows up in the news the most often because people have overshared their social security numbers and credit cards. So the Elastic file system is a shared block storage system. So typically you don't share that with the internet. So that's not it. Glacier and Storage Gateway are both storage systems with different purposes, but their job basically is to act as a proxy for either archival storage or just a proxy storage on premise. So if you know those services, you know that those are out right away. So the only real answer, honestly, is S3, because that's what S3 is designed for, is to host static assets and then share them out so that users can get access to them. So if we go and check this, you'll see that S3 and CloudFront are your primary choices. The other ones can't even offer direct access out to the internet, so they can't be used for that purpose. Any questions about that whole logic and thought process? Okay. Notice here's a graphic showing basically where there are users in other locations that are hitting these caching servers that are then getting back to origin or source. So just know that these servers are scattered all over the world near major ISPs. And so when you say, hey, I want my website to be globally available through CloudFront, they actually have these caches that are all over the world in all these major metropolitan locations that now can host your website static assets. So it's really cool. I actually ran a video company back in 2014 that was based off of this when CloudFront had been out for about a year or two, and it worked like it was awesome. We fed videos out all over the world from one location, and they were speedy. Okay. Now this was in the billing section for the Cloud Practitioner module. Which of the following provides you with the most granular data about your AWS costs and usage? And it also loads that information into Athena, Redshift, QuickSight, or your tool of choice. Now, interestingly enough, if you didn't know the answer, you might have to actually like eliminate just based on like words and interpretation. So consolidated billing, we actually had a previous question on, so we probably would take that out of the running because we know that consolidated billing actually like consolidates everything. So there was no mention about it providing granularity or deeper insight. Budgets sounds like it actually like allows you to make budgets for AWS. Like I want to spend $100 on databases and $200 a month on virtual machines and this much on S3. Like it probably allows you to create budgets for your various services. So then that leaves cost and usage reporting and then the cost explorer. So at this point, that didn't really help you figure out like which one is which, because cost explorer sounds like a dashboard that you would use to explore costs. And the cost and usage report, well, that seems interesting. Makes me wonder like how granular that would be, because that report probably gives you granular data and you probably could load that information into thing if I were to guess, right? So I'm going to do this, and you might be funny around this, but like that report is actually going to give you everything you need. It is a report about your billing data. So hopefully now you've learned something about the various aspects of billing, but now you know that there is actually a cost and usage report. It is extremely detailed, and you can load it into any of the analytics tools that AWS has. Good. Okay, so another billing and pricing one. Which of the following allows you to set coverage targets and receive alerts when your utilization drops below the thresholds you define? So this is an interesting question because it says, which of the following allows you to set coverage targets and receive alerts when your utilization drops below the threshold you define? So the first thing you want to say is, well, what service is it? Well, you don't know, actually, because that's what the question is asking you, is what service is it? It's like, are there any key things here? Well, we got to set coverage targets and we got to receive alerts. Good, we've got actions there. And apparently it's supposed to do this over some kind of threshold. Now, budgets could make sense for this. I'm sitting here thinking, man, budgets would make sense, because what if I have a budget that says that I don't want you to go above a certain threshold? But this is talking about utilization. Dropping below the threshold you define. I don't know that I get alerted when I only have $100 and I spend 50. I'm not sure that I need an alert for that. I'm glad that I'm below the line, but I usually care if I spend 150 over 100. So I don't know. Now I'm not sure about budgets. Trusted advisor sounds interesting, but that's knowing a little bit about that. That's an automated AWS service that does some things. And then cost explorer may be just a complete mystery, but again, it sounds like that explores costs. Maybe that doesn't actually allow you to set alarms and utilization and stuff like that. But that CloudWatch billing alarm, that sounds fascinating, because I am asking to receive alerts, and I am trying to set certain threshold targets, which sounds like setting an alarm. So let me take a guess here and see if that's appropriate. See if that makes sense. And you know what? I was wrong, actually. My first instinct was budgets, and that was the right answer in this particular case. So, and the reason is, by the way, is that AWS does actually, the budgets does actually give you the ability to set custom budgets, right? If your cost or usage exceeds a certain budgeted amount. You can actually, as a new feature, set like reservations for your utilization as well. So in that particular case, you know, the like analytical logic didn't necessarily make any sense. By the way, a CloudWatch billing alarm, it's just a CloudWatch alarm. It's not a CloudWatch billing alarm. So, so in this case, budgets was actually the right answer. So doing the analysis like that isn't always going to help you actually do, like, you're gonna have to like know how the services function. But I thought it was actually a pretty good guess. Okay. All right, so then, and I hope you get a feel at this point, a lot of what you get asked on the exam is basically, do you know what the service does and a little bit about what it's capable of? That's the predominant thing that you're asked here. Okay, so the question here, which service provides event history of your AWS account activity, including actions taken through the console, SDKs, command line tools, and other AWS services? So you really have to know like the services and how the AWS functions in this particular case. Which of these, by the way, do you suspect is the primary tracker of all activity against AWS? If you were to just take a guess, go ahead and put your number in here. Think about it for a second, consider it. Good. Good. So you know that CloudTrail basically tracks all activity. So you've got it. Perfect. So then you know the answer in this particular case is that this is the one that tracks all API activity, because everything in AWS is an API. So you're ready to go. So we check it. There it is. Good. All right. Okay. So now we're asking specific questions about aspects of the simple storage service, which is S3. This, by the way, includes a little bit of marketing speak from Amazon. So give me the two options. Use numbers if you don't mind. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Give me the two numbers that you think are the most reflective of the characteristics of the simple storage service. Is it a storage service with virtually unlimited space? Is it a durable high throughput file system? Is it a highly durable object storage infrastructure? Is it a hybrid cloud storage service, or is it a high performance block storage service? What best describes what S3 is? Take your time. But give me your numbers. Okay, good. So looks like most of you put 1 and 3, a storage service with virtually unlimited space and a highly durable object of storage infrastructure. Let's check it out, because that sounds right to me too. Perfect. Good. So then you know it's not a file system. It's definitely not a block storage service. It's definitely not a hybrid cloud storage service. So you know that. Good. Good. All right. All right. So we're going to go a little faster now. Which service should you use if you need a scalable, fast, and flexible, non-relational database service, a NoSQL database service? There's only one here. Which is the only NoSQL database service here? Give me your number.
Oops.
Yeah, so Yeah, 3. Non-relational should be 3. Perfect. Good, Larry. Absolutely. Right, because we just talked about S3 as a storage service. RDS is the relational database service, and Redshift is based on Postgres 8.1, which is relational. So yes, DynamoDB is 100% the answer. Perfect. So again, you just need to know a little bit about the services, and that's it. It goes a long way, right? Even if you have never used them, as long as you know exactly like how they're described, then you're good to go. Okay, that was a wealth of information you could follow up on. Okay, so what are the things that you can implement to improve the security of your identity and access management users? Now we're talking about IAM, which basically is users, groups, and roles. But mainly users is the big vector there. What are the 2 things you can do to actually make IAM stronger? Not the network stronger, not virtual machine stronger. What are the 2 things you can choose? So go ahead and place your answer. What are the 2 things you can do for your either users, groups, or roles to make them stronger? I mean, we're all users, so you probably know this, right? How many websites do you log into that ask you to enhance security by doing what, right? And in this case, right, they ask you to enable multi-factor authentication, which almost every website you log into does that, or configure a strong password policy for your users, right? Let's check it out. There it is. I will mention, by the way, that block incoming traffic and blocking incoming traffic are network things, so they don't apply to IAM because that's not how IAM functions. And then enable AWS mobile push notifications. Well, that's a function of SNS or AppSync or Cognito. So I don't really know why that would be included. That's not going to enhance security. But a strong password policy and 2-factor authentication, winners every time, right? Good. All right, is this useful for people? Is it okay if we keep going? Because if you're like, no value, please, I won't be offended if you drop. Okay. Which of the following is the key design principle when running an application in AWS? The AWS is crazy for this. And when you do the architecting classes, if you decide to follow that path, just note that this question is also, the answer to this is also relevant for that exam as well, right? So you got to know that, AWS, when we talk about coupling, it's basically how do we integrate things together, right? How do we get things to talk to each other? How do we transfer files? As you can imagine, in this cloud world, they don't want you to integrate so tightly that if one component fails, it drags the other component down, right? So I can already tell you that automatically that tight coupling is definitely not the answer, right? So, but let me ask you about the rest of these, because I see people posting answers, which is absolutely perfect. I'm glad you're already doing that. Is that, yeah, the answer is loose coupling, right? Now, semantic coupling and logical coupling, I'm assuming are a type of coupling because there's actually quite a few, but I have used them so rarely, I don't even know that I could actually define those for you, right? But basically what this says is that tight coupling is not really what we're looking for. Loose coupling, independent phases, that's what we're looking for. And I guess if any of you are programmers, logical coupling, semantic coupling, I guess are related to object-oriented programming. So, and not a key like infrastructure design principle. But the answer is loose coupling. Oh, wow, this answer is actually from 2010. Is that still valid? Interesting. All right. What should you provide to your developers to allow them to access AWS services through the CLI? Only one answer here. What do we think it is? Because AWS will provide you a username and password, right? You can create access keys, you can create SSH keys, and you can actually get API keys. But they're all, there's 2 different services that do that. 3 different services actually that do that. So if you've ever done this before, you know that if you actually want to programmatically interact with AWS, you have really one choice, and that choice is what I'm seeing pop up inside the chat window, which is perfect. Good, thank you. Which is basically access keys. They are associated with a user, and you create them under a user profile. But that when you say I want programmatic access, to AWS, that's when the keys get created. So let's check it out just in case I'm wrong. Yeah, so under security credentials, you can actually come down here and create an access key. You only can have 2 at any given time. And interesting thing, his team is located in the Philippines. John's team, the guy who does Tutorials Dojo. So you notice that a lot of his stuff shows screenshots for AP Southeast. So good. All right. Which service should you use if there's a need to launch a customized self-hosted database, which requires a scheduled shutdown every night to save on costs? Ooh, this is a tricky question. First of all, what service are we using if we're going to launch a customized self-hosted database? Self-hosted, by the way, automatically means that you're doing all the work. So if it's self-hosted, it's probably going to be some kind of virtual machine, right? Because you're self-hosting it. So then looking at those 2 answers, you got to know a little bit about how storage works inside of EC2. Which of those is the right answer if you're going to basically shut it down every night? It's called stopping it, by the way. Well, you have to know is that with instant storage, you can't actually stop the instance. You can terminate it, you can restart it, but you can't actually stop the instance, which means you can't shut it down. Different from terminating it. Shutting it down means you just turned it off. It's still there. It's still eating storage, but it's not running any compute. It's like turning your computer off. Terminating it means you're deleting it. And so they said they wanted a scheduled shutdown where they want to stop it every night. You can't do that with instant storage. So the only answer is the one I see popping up, which is 4, right? Which is you have to use an EBS volume. Just so you know, most people don't use instant storage volumes anymore, but Amazon wants you to know the distinction just so that you can know how to use them properly. So an EBS volume is basically the virtual hard drive service for EC2. As you can see down here, EBS volume is a separate storage system on the right-hand side where it says EBS. Let me actually stamp this. So this is where EBS lives, right here on this layer. So this actually attaches hard drives directly to the virtual machines. Amazon S3 is a remote storage system, so it doesn't actually mount inside of a virtual machine like these instances right here. And EFS is a network file system, and it will actually mount across multiple systems at the same time. So it could be another viable option. So you can't boot off of EFS though. You can only boot off of EBS. Let me get that off the screen. Good. All right. Which of the following are the things that Amazon CloudWatch logs can accomplish? So you got to know not only what CloudWatch does, but you have to have an idea of what its subservice logs does. So if you just even hear the words CloudWatch logs, which of these actually make sense to you? And you got to select 2. So in looking at this, the first thing is that even if you didn't know anything about CloudWatch logs, in looking at the answers, there's only 3 answers that have the word logs in the answer, which is probably a good place to start. Monitoring application logs from Amazon EC2 instances, which is option number 1. That sounds like a possibility. Record AWS management console actions and API calls. Well, I think we covered that already. Sounds like that's what CloudTrail does, right? So that doesn't sound right. Create alarms that automatically stop, terminate, reboot, or recover your EC2 instances. CloudWatch has an alarms actually section, so that sounds like another service. Store your log data at absolutely no charge. First of all, Amazon will give you a lot of things for free, but when you start storing data on them, they charge you for that. That's not even going to happen, right? And then adjust the retention policy for each log group. That sounds kind of reasonable. I don't want to keep logs indefinitely, just for as long as I need them, which could be indefinitely, but most of the time it isn't. So a lot of you put 1 and 5, which I like as well. Check it out, see what they say. And guess what? That's it. So again, even if you didn't know CloudWatch logs right off the bat, you could pretty much eliminate anything that didn't have the word logs in it initially, unless it was just ridiculous. And so 1, 4, and 5 would end up being your possibilities. And Amazon is going to charge you for anything that you put into Amazon. Not the transfer, but just the storage. So here, by the way, is them looking at, and notice on the left-hand side, this is CloudWatch, by the way, and this is not even close to what CloudWatch looks like now. There's like 11 sub-services under CloudWatch now. But notice there is an alarm section, there's a metric section, there's a log section, there's various sections here. So all right. Okay, we'll keep going. We only got like 10 more minutes. Which statement below is correct regarding the components of the AWS global infrastructure? So there's only 3 components in the global infrastructure. You may remember what those are: regions, availability zones, and edge locations. So looking at this, who contains what? That's really the answer here. Good. So some people put in 3. But basically saying that a region contains multiple availability zones. That's number 3 right there. So it goes region, and availability zones are inside of a region. A region can also have an edge location, but predominantly the edge locations are outside of a region. But a region can have an edge location, can have a cache inside of it, right? But they don't say that here, right? They say an edge location contains multiple regions. That's just wrong. Regions are the largest, most encompassing unit. Regions have an edge location and a bunch of availability zones inside of them. So the 3 choice just makes sense here because a region contains AZs. That's the way it works. Oh wait, now I'm just super curious. There's an interactive map. Let's go take a look at this. Oh yeah, how interactive that is actually. Anyway, less digression. Okay. Which of the following can you use to resolve the connection between your on-premise VPN and your AWS virtual private cloud? So how do you connect VPN to VPC? That's basically what we're looking for. So you get to select 2. What are the 2 ways, the 2 services that you can use to help manage your VPN connection basically back to Amazon? So you have to know a little bit about the services, right? In order for this to function. Now, if you're going to connect VPN to AWS, you have to use a virtual private gateway. That's not up for discussion. That is the thing you use for VPN. The rest of these, though, it's like, what is the other component if you want to actually make sure that you can resolve to both on-premise services and to stuff that's up in the AWS? Well, you really have to control how, like, what resolves. If it's like, trying to think of, like, if it was like onpremise.ngl.com, that would be a different thing than aws.ngl.com. And so you have to do some kind of DNS management because we're not going to remember all the IP addresses. We use names to find services. That's what we typically do. So let's see if that's right, because I see some 2s and 4s out there, and that's it, right? The other services just don't even make any sense. This is an internet gateway, which is not really what we're talking about. This is actually also a gateway to the internet. The NAT gateway, it just uses a different form. And VPC pairing is an internal thing. So even by elimination, these would be the only possible answers. Okay. Which of the following Amazon EC2 instance purchasing options, so we're back to EC2 licensing, by the way, so we're back to virtual machine licensing, can help you address compliance requirements and reduce costs by allowing you to use your existing server-bound software licenses? Now, I want you to know I find that hilarious because the licensing type that they're suggesting is actually the most expensive licensing type inside of AWS, but maybe not compared to the server licenses that you have that maybe cost a couple $100,000, right? So like, which of these types, would allow you to basically use an existing like server bound software license? So we can take on-demand off the table, because on-demand doesn't help you with server-bound licensing because you're on a random bunch of servers. Reserve instances is the same. You're on a random bunch of servers. The only difference is you get a discount because you're committed to paying them. So the first and the last answer are really helpful. But then you can have dedicated instances or dedicated hosts. And if it is a hardware-bound instance, in a sense, possibly both of those could help you. But you don't get to control which server you're on with dedicated instances. And so people put dedicated hosts because you get to control which server you're on. It's the same server every time. It's your server. It just happens to sit in Amazon's data center. So most likely this is the right answer, right? Because you get to a host and you just stick virtual machines on top of it. That's what a dedicated host is. So that makes a lot of sense. Any questions about that one? Okay, let's do one more and then we'll open the floor for questions and we will be done. Okay. Which AWS service allows your EC2 compute capacity to automatically scale based on the incoming traffic? What did I say was the secret sauce to getting EC2 virtual machines to scale in a manner that makes them extremely cost effective? In this case, you actually have words that match. Automatically scale, auto scaling. It's a real service. The rest of that doesn't really have anything to do with auto scaling, really, or scaling of any type. So let's choose auto scaling, see what they say. Macy checks for PII and S3 buckets. CloudTrail, we saw before, actually just tracks all API calls against the AWS infrastructure. And Lightsail is an interesting kind of like virtual machine service that most people don't use because it basically gives you a non-enterprise class virtual machine. Like a VPS style, like the old school VPS style stuff that we used to get back in the 90s and the 2000s. Yeah. Okay, we'll sneak in one more. All right, which of the following is capable of inspecting your AWS environment and making recommendations to lower expenditures, improve system performance, and close security gaps? Which of these services is going to make recommendations about what you want to do? It's going to send you an email. It's not going to talk to you exclusively, for example, about money or whatnot, but which one of these is going to say, you know what? I want you to lower cost. I want you to improve your system performance and reliability and close security gaps. I'm going to send you some messages making suggestions about what this could look like. Looks like a bunch of you put Trusted Advisor, which is exactly what it's for. Trusted Advisor's job is to basically act as an advisor for best practices on AWS and basically say, hey, this machine is 2% utilized. It's been here for a month. Is this what you want? You just opened up a bunch of security groups up to the internet. Is this what you want? You've got a bunch of S3 buckets that are basically just wide open to the world. Is this what you want? Right? That's what Trusted Advisor does, is it sends you an email and says, hey, just let you know, this doesn't follow best practice. Is that what you want? So, good. Okay, so notice that this time we actually got a lot further through our 65 questions, right? I think we went from 8 to 26 this time. So we're actually also getting faster at going through these. All right. So it's 5:58 right now. Does anybody have any questions of any type that I can answer about approaching this? I hope this made you more comfortable with the practice exams. Okay. Well, thank you for being here.
Quiet.
This is probably what we're gonna be doing from now on. If something comes up where you're like thought process is different, let me know. Or if you run into an error where you're like, I'm pretty sure that's not the right answer, that happens really rarely, but it can definitely happen. Like if you get hooked up on something, let me know. But this is what you're really supposed to be doing right now, is just running through these questions again and again and again until you get that 95. So, and then you move on to the next exam. Okay. All right. I'm going to hang out here for a second in case anybody else has any questions, but we are officially done. 5:59. Hope the rest of your evening is awesome. We'll see you next Monday, or if you're on the Wednesday group, we'll see you then as well. Okay. Have a good night, everyone. And Kolar, if you want to hang out, you can ask your question at any point in time whenever you're ready.
I had already signed up to take the test before I heard that we get a voucher from this class. So my boss said to ask if there's a way to like give the voucher to somebody who's not in this class to take the test.
Well, to say this, there's a couple of options. Is that you could cancel your exam and reschedule it with the voucher. So that's one option. And then I don't think there's any option at all. I'm sorry, any issue at all giving the voucher to somebody else. So I would say that maybe I would email Victoria and just say, hey, and make sure you know who you want to give it to, and then
Okay.
just send her the names, and I think she can just transfer it.
Then Victoria, I need your email address.
Oh, that's easy. I'll give it to you now. There you go. Victoria DeGroat at webhsolutions.com. Good. Okay. If you get hung up on call, just post in Basecamp, and we'll escalate to make sure you get the help you need. But that it should be that simple. And she'll actually tell you, like, maybe there's a thing where like we can't transfer it, but I'm pretty sure you can transfer the vouchers. But Victoria can confirm that for you.
Okay, thank you for your help.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Have a great night. And if we don't see you on Wednesday, we'll see you next week.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.